In this video, I will be designing an encounter for my Dungeons & Dragons game that is based on the tower defense genre of video games. I'm running the D&D 5th edition module Out of the Abyss, and this takes place during the Blingdenstone chapter, the battle for Blingdenstone. So this is definitely not a typical Dungeons & Dragons encounter. It's its own separate minigame with its own rules that's just sort of inspired by the scenario. But in this video, I talk through my thought process, and I hope it can sort of demonstrate the game design principles I use both for encounter building and also for game design in general. Now, if you want to run this encounter, it's a little impractical just because of the format. I can't share the assets for this very easily. In the video description, I have a link to some screenshots, but that's really the best I can do. It's going to be some work if you actually want to try to run this. Let's get started. Spoilers for Out of the Abyss, Chapter 6, Blingdenstone, begin now. Quick overview of the Blingdenstone chapter. Blingdenstone is an underground city. It is the home of the Sverfneblin, the Deep Gnomes. The gnomes are on your side, at least by the end of the chapter, which is when the battle for Blingdenstone happens. As you can see, Blingdenstone is carved into the natural rock, so it winds up being pretty labyrinthine. It's got some large doors that the Deep Gnomes have put in, entryways to buildings, and it's got these sections of rubble. This is supposed to be a collapsed passageway that you can't get through. It's divided into a few different regions. Outer Blingdenstone is a heavily fortified entrance. It's supposed to be the only way into or out of the city. Inner Blingdenstone is relatively safe. It's where the actual colony of Deep Gnomes is. Rockblight is more dangerous. It's a sealed off section of the city. It's basically a dungeon with monsters in it, but by the time the Battle of Blingdenstone happens, you've cleared it out. The Wererat colony is a colony of Deep Gnomes cursed with wererat lycanthropy. You might have fought them at one point, but by the time of the Battle of Blingdenstone, they're also on your side. And finally, the Pudding Court. The Pudding Court is the home of the Pudding King, who is the main boss of this chapter. He is a minion of Dweeblex, the demon lord in charge of oozes. So the Pudding Court area is completely overrun with gelatinous cubes, slimes, other oozes. So the whole narrative arc of this chapter is that you go around and do all these mini quests for the Deep Gnomes and the Wererats, and you get enough favor with them that you can mount a coordinated attack on the Pudding King. So the Pudding King holds court here, and you march in with an army of Deep Gnomes, Earth Elementals, Wererats, Ghosts, fight off the oozes that are in this area enough to get the player characters to the Pudding King. You have some number of combat encounters with oozes on your way to the Pudding King, and then the Pudding King himself is like a boss battle. So I think overall this is a really cool setting for an encounter. By this point, the players have had a lot of boss encounters where the enemies are just too powerful and they had to just run away and survive. So it's cool for them to be able to have a boss battle where they can actually prevail. So I'd like to keep that battle itself pretty much as written. I need to make it a little harder because my characters will be level 8 at this point. And I think I'd like to move it to this area here. This is a large spherical castle, basically, in the middle of the cavern. And it just seems like a cooler place for a boss fight. In the module, it's just abandoned, so I think I'm going to move it there. But what I'd like is to have the players somehow play out what's going on outside the boss battle. This whole thing with the Earth Elementals and the Deep Gnomes attacking all the slimes seems really cool. Something I've been wanting to try out for a while is to cut back and forth between two encounters. You see this in movies a lot, action movies, where you'll cut back and forth between two different action scenes that are going on at the same time. So we'll play out a little bit of the boss battle in the castle and then a little bit of the larger battle going on outside, and go back and forth. Star Wars loves this trope. In Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, it cuts back and forth between 4 different action scenes on 4 different scales going on at the same time in this extended action sequence. I'm not a filmmaker or anything, but I think I can understand why you would do this. It lets you keep up the tension more than if you just had the action scenes happen one after the other, and each one had its own rising and falling action. But for whatever reason, you never see this in games. I'm trying to think, I can't think of any examples where you cut away from a boss battle in the middle of the battle to some other gameplay going on and then cut back to the same boss battle. I'm sure there's some examples, but it's definitely not very common in games. So it's something I've always wanted to try, but I think it probably has some potential downsides. There's probably good reasons you don't see it very much. I'm going to do it anyway, but I'm going to try to keep that in mind, the potential issues with this. Okay, so one obvious issue is that the players only control one character. So how can you have them fighting inside the castle but also fighting outside? I can imagine you could have like some of the players decide to go fight the boss and some stay outside. I don't think that's great because then you have some players waiting around for a long time while the others go. So what I'm imagining is you have all the player characters go do the boss battle in the castle as written, but then you also give the players some like earth elementals or something to control to fight off some oozes on the outside. So that's pretty good, but I think I would like to turn it around. So instead of the good guys storming the castle, you have the oozes coming out from the castle into the rest of Blingdenstone, and you have to defend it. A couple reasons for this. One is it uses more of the map. You can put the defenses anywhere, and it sort of plays into the idea that Blingdenstone is this really well-fortified place. Just the natural design of it makes it hard to attack, so it sort of plays into the strengths of the city. So the idea behind this is that the Pudding King is planning an invasion of the rest of Blingdenstone. He's going to send out all his minions, and that is when he's the most vulnerable, so that's when the party goes in to fight him. But you have to make sure that the invasion fails, so all of your allies have to defend it well enough. So these sort of winding passageways that somebody attacking Blingdenstone would need to go down, and just the general setup of this encounter, make me think of a tower defense game. So if you're not familiar, a tower defense game works with it has these winding paths that the enemies traverse. You have to set up your defenses along the paths to try to do as much damage to the enemies before they get into their path, and your success is determined by how many enemies make it past you. Yeah, so this is a video game genre. It's one of my favorite genres of video games, but I've never tried it in Dungeons & Dragons or anything like that, and I've always wanted to. So I can also immediately see some downsides to trying this in D&D. But again, I'm going to do it anyway. Just keep the downsides in mind and deal with them as they come up. Game design challenges here. So where exactly is this going to play out? Outer Blingdenstone looks perfect at first glance. This path that you have to traverse to get into the town looks exactly like a tower defense path. So that's cool, but I don't think I'm going to use this. This is a little too tight. I want to use like the entire map of the town. And if I had the whole encounter running here, it wouldn't be quite what I'm looking for. I'm not worried about the fact that that's supposed to be the only way into town. Oozes can crawl through small cracks and come in anywhere. I'm going to say that any of these entryways is a potential starting place for an ooze. As for where they're going, the place that makes the most sense story-wise is Diggermatic Court. This is where the leaders of the Blingdenstone colony reside. That's fine, but I think I'd prefer somewhere a little more central. I think I'm going to move it here to this old shrine called the Ruby in the Rough. I'll decide later why that's the case. So what I'm imagining is about 3 paths that start from somewhere on the outside and wind their way into this area here. I want the paths to be winding. I want them to come close to each other and close to themselves. That's always a good place to put your defenses in a tower defense game. I think that following these tunnels is a pretty good idea. It winds up making it look pretty winding. So I think that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start by trying to draw some paths on this map that I want my enemies to traverse, and I will go from there. Okay, I think these paths look pretty good. We've got 3 different paths here, and one of them branches into 2 separate paths. They all start from the outside and end here at the Ruby in the Rough. You can see that these paths do go through the rubble that's blocked off, and they go through the doors. I think that's fine. These are oozes. They can get through anything. I may make it so that maybe the oozes get slowed down when they get to a door or something like that, but I didn't try to avoid them. Let's think about the creatures we're dealing with here. Oozes are slow. They're not very strategic. They can fit through anything. Actually, they're pretty good enemies for tower defense because they'll just keep moving along no matter how much you attack them. The gray ooze is the smallest one. It is corrosive. When you attack it, you have a chance of your armor or weapons taking damage. The ochre jelly is larger and a bit stronger, and it has this split ability that when it gets attacked, sometimes it can split into 2 smaller jellies. The black pudding is even stronger. It has both the corrosive features of the gray ooze and also the split ability of the ochre jelly. And then, of course, the famous gelatinous cube. The thing about the gelatinous cube is that often you don't even know it's there until it's too late and you walk into it and you get engulfed by it. I don't really see that coming up in this encounter, but we'll see. So between these four, I think we've got plenty to work with on the Ooze side. Typically you have a bunch of small enemies come in, and then you have one big strong enemy that you need everybody to hit, and then sometimes that goes a bit slower. So yeah, so I think we've got some options here. In the module as written, each mini quest that you complete translates into one advantage or additional thing you have in the battle against the Pudding King. So we have a Nomi Pathshudder is a wizard in charge of earth elementals, so if you do her quest, then you have an earth elemental joining you in the fight. Instead of having it be part of the smaller combat, I'm going to say that the different quests that you complete give you different abilities in the tower defense part. So I think earth elementals will be our main defensive unit. So these things do a lot of damage. They can move through earth. Yeah, so I think they'll be pretty good. If you complete the quest for Chipgrin Goldwhisker, the leader of the Were-Rats, you have Were-Rats at your disposal. So Were-Rats are immune to regular damage, and they're sneaky. I don't see that coming up very much, but one thing that I do think is very useful about them is that they like to set traps. So having some traps along the path that the Were-Rats can activate seems really good. If you help out the ghosts, led by Warren Jadger, then you have some ghosts at your disposal. Ghosts are interesting. They deal necrotic damage, they can possess people and frighten people, but oozes are immune to being frightened. So I'd like to use these somehow. I'm not completely clear how, but I think there's a lot of possibilities with a ghost. In the module, they can distract people to let you re-roll something. So something like that could be pretty good. You have a gelatinous cube on your side named Globagool. It is intelligent and has been traveling with the party for a long time at this point. In the module, it kind of intimidates the other oozes, so I definitely think we can see a use there. Dorbo Diggermatic leads the army, so you can have a bunch of deep gnomes attacking with just like regular attacks, regular weapons. Kazook Pickshine is an alchemist who is able to create explosives. In the module, that lets you clear out this rubble that's blocking the path between Rock Blight and the Pudding Court to let you mount the attack from this direction if you want. I'm thinking that either opening a path or closing a path by collapsing a tunnel would make a lot of sense. That's not something you see in tower defense very often. I think the reason for that is that the most straightforward way would just completely block the bad guys from getting to the end of the path, so it automatic win. But maybe we can make it so that it slows them down or something else instead. We've got Gurnik Tapfinger, who is a priest in charge of the Ruby in the Rough Shrine. He might be able to call on some Galeb Doer, which are other earth elementals. These things spend most of their time like rolled up as boulders, and they can move very fast if they're rolling in boulder form, and they can also animate other boulders to attack. And finally we've got Tappy Foamstrap, the barkeep. I don't know what she's going to do, but she seems like she might be an interesting character, so if I can think of something, I'll put it in. So looking at this is a lot. I don't think that it makes sense to have a different type of defensive tower you can use for each of these allies. So I think the next step is I'll try to start working out the basic mechanics of exactly how things are going to move, how things are going to attack, how to keep track of hit points, that sort of thing. I'm not going to worry about trying to incorporate all these different types of attacks and defense. I'm just going to start with the basics, with like probably the earth elemental versus just a basic ooze. And I think once I have that down, I can sort of build off it. Okay, so I think I've got the basic idea down. You can see on each of the paths I have added some waypoints in blue. So the idea here is that the waypoints divide each path into segments, and the enemies come in, and each turn they advance by one segment. So this gray ooze on its first turn will show up in here, and then second turn will show up here, and anybody who can attack anything in this segment can attack this gray ooze. I'm not worried about like where it is exactly on here. But each turn it moves one, and if it doesn't get destroyed by the end, then it reaches the base, and that's bad for you. Your main defense is these earth elementals, and you can place these anywhere and touch some of the segments. And the idea is that any segment that this earth elemental is touching, it can attack an ooze in that segment. So this earth elemental could attack this ooze. So obviously you're going to want to place them so that they cover multiple segments. One obvious way you could do that is by covering up the waypoint, then you're touching both the segments. I'm going to say that's not allowed. You can't cover up a waypoint. In this case, the best you could do with each of these is 2 segments each. So the gray oozes have 1 hit point, and the earth elementals do 1 hit point per turn. Keep it very simple. Let's test that away to make sure we understand how this works. So I have it so in the first turn, 3 gray oozes are going to come into this first segment, and these 4 gray oozes are going to follow next turn. So the oozes move, and now you attack. So obviously this earth elemental will attack 1 gray ooze, destroy it. Okay, this earth elemental, there's no oozes in any of the segments it can reach, so it doesn't do anything. All right, next turn. Okay, so pretty obviously this one hits one of these, destroying it. This one hits one of these, destroying it. Next turn, okay, obviously that one hits there, this one hits here. Next turn, this one hits here. Next turn, okay, this Ooze is driving along, nothing can hit it here, but we know what's going to happen next turn. Ooze travels here, and this Earth Elemental destroys it. Okay, great. And so nothing makes it to the base in that wave. So that's good. That seems pretty straightforward. I think that's what I want to go for. Normally I would advise trying to stick with the system of the game you're in as much as possible. So this is D&D. Normally, to make an attack, you would roll to see if you hit and roll for damage. There's a number of reasons why you would want to stick with that. The players are more used to it. Another big one is that sometimes the players have interesting abilities. Like if one of my players has an ability that can make a creature do more damage, and they want to apply it to one of these Earth Elementals, I think that's great, but it doesn't really work in the way I've set it up. If my players do have something like that, I'll try to figure out some equivalent way to work it in. Maybe like for one turn per wave, an Earth Elemental can do 2 damage instead of 1, something like that. But the big benefit of not doing it that way for this encounter is speed. If I have my players roll for every attack, it's going to take way too long. But anyway, yeah, I think this is a pretty good basic mechanic. Let's go through some other units I have in mind. Okay, so Were-Rats. Place on any segment, once per wave, attack all oozes in that segment. So for this, you would place the Were-Rat on the segment itself. They can't touch more than one segment. And then once per wave, that Were-Rat can set off a trap, which traps every ooze in that segment. And then it gets deleted because it can only be used once per wave. So that's a good way. If you've got like 10 oozes, you can hit them all at once if they're all in the same segment. Ghosts. Place on any segment to subdivide. Yeah, so the idea over there is that you could basically use the ghost as a waypoint. So now if you place it on the midpoint of this segment, then it now becomes 2 segments. And so it'll take twice as long for the oozes to go by there. And the idea is that the ghost is like slowing down things that come by there. I don't know, scaring them or knocking things into their path or something like that. But yeah, you place it once at the beginning of the wave and it just stays there for the whole wave. Galeb Dur. Once per turn, move up to 1,000 feet in a straight line. Attack up to 1 ooze in each segment crossed. Something of having the Galeb Dur start here in the center, and then once after everybody's moved and people have attacked, then the Galeb Dur can turn into a boulder and roll up to 1,000 feet in some direction. And every segment that it crosses, so in this case, this segment and this segment, you can attack up to 1 ooze in each of those. So this is the Galeb Dur, like rolling and doing destruction as it goes by. The next turn starts from there, and you can go, say, here. So then you get 1, 2, 3, 4 segments there. So if there's an ooze on each of those 4 segments, you can do damage all 4 of them. Yeah, and there's the question like what happens if it ends on a waypoint. I'm going to say that you just can't cross or end on a waypoint. And Kazook gets placed on a waypoint at the beginning of a wave. And you can place multiple ones on the same waypoint, things like that. And so each of these is like an explosive charge that you're preparing to set off. If you activate this Kazook here, then no oozes will be able to cross this waypoint this turn. So they can sort of build up here. So that could be one way that you can sort of like cluster them together. So then you can have a Were-Rat ready in the next segment to take them all out. But yeah, each time you use one, then it gets deleted. And you have a certain number of them to use per wave. Okay, so that's it for what I have for the defenders so far. I think that's pretty good. It's starting to get pretty complicated, and I might not do any more than this. For the attackers, so the Grey Ooze is the main thing. I think for the most part, I'm just going to use Grey Oozes. If I want something with 10 hit points, I'll just use 10 Grey Oozes, something like that. But we've got a couple more that I think would be good for like boss waves. So I've got the Ochre Jelly. And the idea with the Ochre Jelly is that it splits twice. Again, everything only takes 1 hit to kill. The way this works is that the first time you kill the Ochre Jelly, it becomes 2 smaller Ochre Jellies. So it only takes 1 hit, but then it becomes 2 medium-sized ones. All right, and then at the end of the turn, these 2 move on. This Earth Elemental can hit one of them, and it subdivides again. All right, so now I've got a medium and 2 smalls. They move on. Let's say this Earth Elemental kills one of the small ones. And they move on, move on. This Earth Elemental kills the medium one. So now we've got 3 smalls here. If you had a Were-Rat here in this segment, then you could activate it then and take out all 3 of these. The black pudding is even stronger. It has the same splitting mechanic, except if this earth elemental hits this black pudding, then it splits into 2 smaller ones, 2 medium-sized ones, and one of them moves forward by a segment. This earth elemental now could hit this one. It's still the same turn. The oozes haven't had a turn to move yet. Now we've got 2 small ones, and again, one of the small ones advances. Now we're still the same turn, so this earth elemental can't attack this small one. Both earth elementals have attacked, so now the oozes get to move. You can see that the black pudding is advancing really fast here. Let's see what happens here. So this earth elemental will attack this one, a small one here, and a small one in the next segment. This earth elemental will attack one of these, and then the oozes get to move. 1, 2, 3. So it actually looks like these 2 earth elementals could take out the black pudding, even though they couldn't do the ochre jelly. That's interesting. I can see that this mechanic also being difficult to deal with, especially if you're relying on were-rats a lot and they need them to be clustered up. Then I have the gelatinous cube. I don't think this is a great idea, but I was thinking that when you hit a gelatinous cube, it gets destroyed, everything has 1 hit point. But then that earth elemental gets stunned for 1 round because its fist got stuck in the cube and has to pull it out or something. I'll think about that. This seems pretty good for a start for the basic mechanics. I'm going to try to do a wave like later on that uses all 3 paths, and it's a bit more complicated, like maybe what the last wave will look like. Yeah, see if I can balance it, see if I think it is fun to play, see if I think it doesn't take too long. Here is the layout I went with for my first playtest. So the players have at their disposal 6 earth elementals, 8 were-rats, 4 ghosts, 1 Galebdur, and 6 Kazook Pickshines. The oozes, each of the 3 paths has 3 sets of oozes that come in each of the first 3 turns. The yellow path, first turn, 5 gray oozes, second turn, 5 gray oozes, third turn, 2 black puddings. The red path, 5 gray oozes, 5 gray oozes, 3 gray oozes, and an ochre jelly. And the orange paths, 3, 4, and 5 gray oozes. I tested this out. I managed to get through without any of the oozes getting to the base. Looks like I've got 3 Kazooks left and 5 were-rats left, so I only used 3 of each. I'm going to go over each of the units and how it felt to play them. The earth elementals functioned like a good defensive tower in tower defense. You just sort of set them down and forget about them. Occasionally you had to choose like which branch to attack. I managed to put them all so they were all on multiple segments. If I had more and I had to put one somewhere where we could only reach 1 segment, that might feel a little less effective, but I'm not sure that it actually is, because often you don't even have a chance to hit multiple segments on a single turn. But I'd say the earth elementals work pretty well. I think I might add a couple more for the final wave, but 6 was pretty good. I'm going to need to start thinking about how I want the players to control these. If I've got 4 players, maybe giving them each 2 sounds pretty good. The were-rats were, when I used them, they were really satisfying. If you could like build up like 8 oozes in a single segment and then hit them all at once, that was really cool. But you can see I didn't really use that many of them. I'm thinking about adding some sort of restriction, like maybe you can only place them in a segment that does not have an earth elemental guarding it. That might make it a little more challenging, because you really want to put everything toward the end, so that might encourage you to spread things out a little bit. Yeah, the ghosts felt like they worked, but it wasn't completely clear how effective they were. I think you run into the issue that if you have fewer attackers than you have segments on a path, then adding additional segments doesn't really help you that much. It slows things down a little bit, but it doesn't like give you any more attacks. So I feel like I might have been okay even without the ghosts. I think it's a good idea. I think I like players strategically thinking about where to place them. I think to make them a little more effective, I might get rid of a couple of the waypoints so that you're actually at a point where more waypoints will help. The Galebdur is a lot of fun, like drawing out a path and hitting a whole bunch of enemies as you go past. It's fun to play, and it's also very effective. I didn't think about this, but it's the only thing that can hit something anywhere on the map. So if you've got a section like here where I don't have anything defending it, then the Galebdur can zip over there and take care of anything. It is pretty powerful, so I'll probably keep it to just 1 Kazook that you place on these waypoints that stops the oozes from advancing. It's not bad, but I think it needs a little bit of a tweak. One thing, the map gets pretty crowded when you have oozes all over the place, and it can be hard to remember where the waypoints are, and so covering them up like this is not ideal. And also I didn't use it that much. I think what I'll do is give you fewer of them, but you don't have to place them ahead of time. You can decide at any point, for any waypoint, okay, I want to create a blockage right here. Yeah, so it was pretty handy the couple times I used it, but I don't think you need to spend a lot of time thinking about it ahead of time. And getting some of these icons off the map will probably be pretty good. The Oozes all did pretty good. It's kind of a pain to move around 5 tokens at once, but it's not too bad. Definitely the mechanic of splitting is a good one. Yeah, I don't know why the black pudding doesn't seem to be that much stronger than the ochre jelly. I think it's fine. I'll just keep them both. I didn't use any gelatinous cubes, and I guess I don't plan on doing it. I think that just makes it complicated, like having status effects on the earth elementals, having them be stunned. Just one more thing to keep track of. I don't think that's worth it. I mean, despite how complicated it looks, this did run pretty smoothly when it was just me doing it. I'm sure it's going to be more complicated with the players, so I want to keep it as easy to run as possible. Maybe I'll make a few of these tweaks and give this final wave one more playtest. Okay, here is the tweaked version that I just tried out. As planned, I removed some of the waypoints and eliminated some of the units. This felt really good, it felt really balanced, and the strategies paid off. I'm pretty happy with this. So the turns were pretty similar, but I did stagger them a little bit. So this path has oozes coming in turns 1, 2, 3, and 5. That definitely makes a difference for the were-rats. It's harder to use Kazook to line it up with the were-rats. So a little bit of staggering makes that a little bit more interesting. Yeah, so real quick I'll go over how each of the units was important. So the yellow path with the black pudding, you can see I used 2 of the 4 ghosts here, 2 of the 4 were-rats. I wound up using 1 were-rat and 1 Kazook, one of the 4 Kazooks here. So I planned to potentially use more, but this worked out fine. With these 3 elementals, it has pretty good coverage, and the Galeb door went back and forth a couple times, picked up a couple of the oozes that slipped through. The red path with the ochre jellies, the were-rats are really good against the ochre jellies if you can get them to line up. So in this case I had a ochre jelly start on turn 2 but also turn 4, which means you can't just use a single Kazook to delay the first ochre jelly by 1 and get a single were-rat to take care of both ochre jellies. But I wound up using 2 Kazooks here, and I think that was worth it. And on the orange path, I didn't put any ghosts, and I never used Kazook over here. Just a few elementals and this were-rat here. So I have 3 waves of 4, 6, and 8 gray oozes. And so this were-rat I just used on the last wave of 8, the elementals, and I think I used the Galeb door a little bit. We're able to finish off the 4 and 6 without any problem. Yeah, so I had 1 were-rat left over, 1 Kazook left over, so overall I'd say that was pretty close. So I think it's turned out pretty well. I also feel like this rule set is easy enough to keep track of. There's no numbers really to keep track of, which is really nice. A lot of times in a tower defense, after you've placed all of your units, you can run into a period of time where the player's not doing anything. They're just waiting for all the actions to resolve as the enemies move down the paths. I feel like this rule set is pretty good in that the players do have to make choices all the time. Yeah, so which direction the elemental is going to punch is one thing, but the main things is the were-rats, the Kazooks, and the Galeb door. There's a lot of thought that goes on, like looking ahead to make sure that you can get everything done in time. So great, possibly I could tweak this a little more, but I think it's good enough. So here's a slightly cleaned up version that I'm going to actually use for the players. Yeah, so I think the prep here is pretty much done. I stripped it down and made 2 introductory waves. This is wave 1. There's only 1 path. All you have is 2 elementals and 1 were-rat. And the only enemies are gray oozes. This is obviously pretty straightforward. It's just to get you started. Here's wave 2. It opens up the second path, and you have ghosts and a Galeb door to work with, and it introduces the black pudding and the ochre jelly. Then the third and final wave, the only thing that gets added is the orange paths and Kazook. I've playtested wave 1 and wave 2, and they're possible to complete perfectly. I'm not sure about the difficulty, but I don't really care that much. They're mostly like tutorials. If the players have any difficulty at all with wave 1 or wave 2, I'll let them redo it or just move on. The purpose of this part is just to learn the mechanics. So, if they're still learning the mechanics and make some mistakes, that's great. Then they can apply it in wave 3. I still need to prep the boss fight with the Pudding King that's going on during this, but I feel like the tower defense part is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. I think my prep is done. I hadn't decided how I was going to split up going back and forth between the tower defense and the boss fight. I think, having played the tower defense, I think it's not a good idea to split up a wave because the players are going to be forming all these strategies in their head. And if you interrupt that, then they'll have to figure it all out again. It's just going to slow things down. So I think having a complete wave and then you switch to the boss fight and a complete wave and then switch to the boss fight. And I think I'll try to aim for the same thing with the boss fight, where there's like a natural breaking point in the boss fight at the end of phase 1 and the end of phase 2. Maybe phase 1 is like running down a corridor chasing him to the throne room. Yeah, the Pudding King can transform into an ooze. So I think it would make sense that halfway through the battle, the Pudding King transforms into an ooze and completes the fight like that. Yeah, so that can happen at the very end of phase 2. And like I said, this thing of switching back and forth between two scenes is kind of experimental, and this thing with the tower defense is kind of experimental, so I don't know, it feels pretty good, but it could go horribly wrong. We'll see. So I'll leave it here, and I'll come back after I have run this encounter. Okay, I'm back having run this encounter, and it did not go horribly wrong. Mostly it went according to plan. Wave 1 was very straightforward as expected. Wave 2 was not bad. One ooze did get through in Wave 2. I had planned to let them redo Wave 1 or 2 if anything got through, but it was pretty clear they could have beaten it if they'd done it again. And then on Wave 3, they did a really good job, better than I did when I was playtesting it. And nothing got through, and they had a few units left over. But at the same time, it wasn't trivial. They did have to plan, and it was a challenge. Yeah, their solution for Wave 3 was very different from mine. The south path, the orange path, I knew this was the easiest, but they figured out that you can completely solve it with using, I think, 1 ghost, 2 were-rats, and 2 kazooks. So they just allocated those resources there, and then all of the earth elementals and the Gale of Door and everything, and the other were-rats and kazooks, they had to left over for the yellow and red paths. So that was cool to see. It was interesting. I kept track of approximately how long it took each wave, and went pretty well according to plan. Wave 1 was 10 minutes, it was very brief. Wave 2 was 55 minutes, and Wave 3 was 70 minutes. And I'd say that time was split pretty well evenly between preparing, setting out the initial units, and then actually running it. Maybe 50-50 between those. Like I said, I was concerned because sometimes in tower defense games, you just set your units down and forget about them and wait for them to resolve. So I like that of the 5 units, only one of them, the ghost, you don't do anything with once you place it. The other 4 involve some decision making during the actual gameplay. At the same time, the players did spend a lot of time in the prep, just deciding where to place things initially, and they would basically have to think out the entire wave, either be able to prove that they could beat it or be pretty close. But then still, once you get going, there are some decisions to be made to make sure you execute your strategy correctly. So it's not like being able to plan things out just completely solves the problem. Good reminder, there's nothing like playtesting to see how clear your instructions are. There was some confusion during the encounter of the difference between a wave and a turn. Players started calling turns waves when a single set of oozes would appear. And so I thought, okay, yeah, we can do that. So I started calling them waves, but that was a mistake because a lot of my instructions refer to waves and turns. So it's very important to be consistent about that. Oh yeah, I said place aware at any unguarded segment. I should have been clear what unguarded segments were. I just meant there was no earth elemental on it. Also, exactly where the ghosts get placed on the segments turns out to be important because it determines where along the segment it is determines whether an earth elemental can reach it or not. I don't see a great way to improve that. I just had to adjudicate it in the moment. If you're sloppy about that, you can change whether a strategy works or not. So I remember saying that if the players had some ability that could come into play somehow, that I wanted them to be able to use it, and I would just do the best I could. And that worked out pretty well because they had a bigwig mushroom, which enlarges a creature. So I said, okay, yeah, sure, that's a cool idea. You can enlarge one, I think I set up to 2 earth elementals, but they wound up only needing 1. So here's a chart of the number of each friendly unit and each enemy unit in each of the 3 waves. And of course, I had tried to introduce them a bit at a time. I think it worked out pretty well. I don't think that any one wave was too complicated. Definitely there was, I think the biggest jump was from wave 1 to wave 2. And if I was going to tweak this, I would put an additional wave in between wave 1 and wave 2. Like wave 1.5 or something. Because between wave 1 and wave 2, I was introducing both Ghosts and Gale of Door on the friendly side and Ochre Jellies and Black Pudding on the hostile side. 2, something like that. Yeah, so have 2 tracks on this wave 1.5, and just introduce Ghosts, don't have a Gale of Door yet, and for the oozes, just have an Ochre Jelly with no Black Pudding. Yeah, I think this sort of linear progression is probably the best thing to aim for. So this whole thing of switching back and forth between the tower defense and the boss fight, I thought it went fine. It certainly didn't accomplish the same thing that it would in an action movie. It's not like I couldn't keep the tension up for 2 sessions, obviously, and like even 30 minutes, you can't give the tension up that long. I probably could have just done all the tower defense in one session and all of the boss fight in the next session. It would have been fine. Sometimes it's good to mix up what you do in a single session, so that's good. I would do this again if I had another encounter where I thought it made sense, but I think doing them sequentially is also totally fine. One thing that worked out pretty well in this case is that this was the first encounter I designed for this entire chapter. There's this concept of the final exam boss, and I don't know if somebody in particular came up with it, but it's a popular idea where the boss encounter is like a final exam that requires you to use knowledge from earlier in the dungeon or whatever. I wouldn't say that this is an example of that, but when you're doing a final exam boss encounter, I find it's really handy to start with the boss encounter, design that, and then you can use all the pieces of that to like put throughout the rest of the dungeon or the game or whatever. I really like that. I feel like that's a great way to make everything seem coherent, put in some foreshadowing. So having this already prepared as the final encounter was really handy for me. Whenever I was designing an encounter for the rest of the chapter, I could think, okay, what's going to show up in the final boss encounter, and find some way to incorporate that as a piece of foreshadowing. Like I had one with the Galeb door, and I had the players control the Galeb door, rolling them into boulders around a regular battle map. And I thought that was a good way to foreshadow how the Galeb door works for this encounter. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching.